Okay. Hey, everybody. We are Group 1, and we are going to be discussing whether or not there should be a penalty for not voting in any election. So our group's taking the side that there should be a penalty for not voting. Honestly, it's not about trying to force people or punish people. It's about reminding them that every vote is a big deal in every single election. We live in a democracy where we're supposed to have a say in what happens, but that only works if people actually show up to vote. When a bunch of people skip out, the results don't really reflect what the American people want. It ends up being decided by a certain demographic that's willing to go vote. That's not fair representation, and we already accept that some things like paying taxes or going to jury duty are just part of being an American citizen, but voting should be seen the same way as a responsibility, not just I'll do it if I have time. Some countries like Australia have a small fine if you don't vote, and their turnout per capita has been 23% greater in turnout. It's not a huge punishment. It's just enough to be like, hey, this matters, the same as a speeding ticket or putting on your seatbelt. Honestly, if something as small as a fine can help more people participate and make an election more fair, why not consider it? So we believe that having a penalty can push people to take voting more seriously. And in the long run, that makes our system stronger and more fair for everyone. Taylor?
In a democratic society, the power of the people lie in the ability to vote. But a lot of people would rather go binge watch a Netflix series than show up to the polls. And I get it. Sometimes there's long lines that you have to wait in, or you have to drive a distance just to go vote. But in the United States, millions of eligible citizens, they skip their right to vote, which leads to a lower voter turnout and a government that may not fully reflect the will of its people. We don't get to just opt out of paying taxes or showing up for jury duty. So, in that same way, voting should be treated. It should be not just a right, but a civic duty. And when people do not fulfill that duty without a valid reason, there should be a small penalty. I'm not saying we should throw people in jail for not voting. However, there should be a fine or consequences, just like there is when you don't pay taxes. There, there are people who are fined a small amount if they don't vote, and their turnout rates are consistently over 90%. Meanwhile, here in the United States, we are struggling to get half the population to participate in major elections. So, yes, voting should still be a choice, but it shouldn't be left in the hands of a personal choice. Many countries enforce mandatory voting laws, implementing penalties to ensure civic duties. Argentina imposes fines. Australia leaves a $20 fine for non-complacent. And Austria penalty is approximately $70. These measures aim to promote active citizen engagement and uphold the democratic process. Obadiah.
Hello. So, one main reason I support penalty for not voting is because it helps normalize participation. When voting becomes something everyone expected to do, it shifts from being optional to being a standard part of citizenship. Just like renewing your license or filling out the census, it also helps reduce the influence of extreme voices. Since low turnout often means only the most passionate groups show up, which can skew election results. When more people vote, we get a more balanced and accurate reflection of what the public actually wants. Plus, introducing a penalty doesn't mean taking away freedom. It just means putting a little weight behind something that's supposed to matter to all of us. We accept consequences for skipping other responsibilities. So why not the same for voting? That's my stance on things.
And that was 5 minutes. So I'll be introducing our side, which is anti anti-penalties, which is not mandatory. In a perfect society, I believe everyone could vote. Like, they could vote when they want to, but we don't live in that society. We live in a world where when we can and choose to vote, and it's not an obligation to do so because of our several constitution amendments. And like, I would like to add on and say that many obstacles in America, USA, are like mental health disabilities, physical disabilities, and medical, neurodivergent, and economic struggles. We believe like a lot of struggles that USA citizens, they have a lot of struggles, so they can't vote. And I would like to bring John to start his role.
All right. So, a couple things for me, and forgive me, I just clicked out of my screen and I got to get back into it. But here we go. Well, I am on the side that I believe that there should not be a penalty for people who choose not to vote. First and foremost, voting is a fundamental right. Just as Santiago was saying, it's an expression of individual freedom. Just as we have the right to express our opinions, we also have the right to abstain from participating in electoral process. Imposing penalties has some impacts that, could cause resentment. People that are forced to do something and don't want to follow along, obviously, it causes strife with that as well. Additionally, not everybody feels adequately informed or prepared to make decisions at the ballot box. Forcing individuals to vote could lead to uninformed or careless choices. They truly don't reflect beliefs of people. If they don't know what they're talking about or they aren't informed of who they're voting for, and you walk up and you're like, oh, well, he's got a blue shirt. Blue's my favorite color. Is that who you really want to be voting for? Maybe that could be the right person. I'm just using blue as a color. I like blue, but anyway, we also need to consider the systemic barriers that individual face, such as economic factors, access to transportation, voter suppression tactics, penalizing those who don't vote just because they can't get a ride doesn't seem fair to me. I know we have other ways that they're doing it, voting by mail and things like that. Those are options that I know that the other side can come back with, but sometimes people just don't. What about the people that really can't even read and write? Believe it or not, we have a lot of people in this country that can't. But rather than imposing penalties, we should encourage voter participation through positive incentives. Education and outreach programs, I think, would be phenomenal. Engaging citizens in meaningful conversations about the importance of their vote, because it is important. And I strongly do believe that our vote is important and people should vote, but I don't think we should force them to vote. And that brings me into, I'll stop here because I'll have some questions, but that's kind of where obviously I feel that where we're at. I am hearing what the other side is saying, and I do definitely think there's some middle ground where we can all work together and find a nice common area. Drew,
before you speak, I don't know if you guys know what's going on with the Zoom. The Zoom says we only have 6 minutes left on the call.
Yeah, so Drew, do you want to do your intro real quick and then we'll hop into questions?
Yeah, I can do a really quick one here. One of my main points that I had was the idea of the First Amendment. I have here, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or bridging the freedom of speech or press, or the right of people to peacefully to assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. So basically what I'm getting at there is a right to petition the government. And I feel like at times the choice not to vote could be because we don't agree with either candidate. We don't agree with the policy. We don't really have a option that we like. So I feel like the choice not to vote could also be taken as a petition against the options. So with that in mind, I feel like it would fall right into the First Amendment right that we have to be able to air our grievances and choose to abstain from voting. Kind of going off what John said, I think there's I feel like it's a good thing to vote. But I feel like we should get that choice as individual.
Perfect. All right. Do you guys have any questions for us?
We do. Just a second here. So early on, I heard you guys talking about encouraging engagement and the penalties that could potentially, I got to find where I wrote my notes down, sorry. That you thought maybe penalties could motivate people to be able to do something. My question, I think, is that if we did force penalties on people for not voting, how would we deal with the resentment that people may have, or people that economically just cannot do that?
Yeah, I totally get what you're asking. And no doubt if we were to implement this, we would have to work on creating more transportation, creating more ways to vote, and making easier access for people, because that will be an absolute necessity. But as far as them resenting to comply, that could just be like any other traffic ticket or parking ticket. I mean, what's to stop people from speeding all the time just because there's a fine? But I absolutely agree that we will need to work on having easier access and access for people who don't have transportation or don't have internet or any of that. So I totally, there will be things to work out. A question for you guys would be, what's the difference between a legal obligation like jury duty and having to go vote?
Well,
I can
believe
answer that.
Oh, go
Oh.
ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No. Okay, I was just gonna say that jury duty requires a lot of participation, because if there's none participation, we can have like a due process and a fair trial. We need a fair trial in this justice system, and if you were not to get participation, it will all crumble. And although the purpose for voting is to participate in a democratic decision, we have the ability, to not vote, because it's not gonna impact us as much. I mean, it would impact us in the future, but it would not impact us if we were to release a criminal without like a fair trial. Like, I believe that it's jury duty is more important. I don't want to say this, but it's more important than voting, because there's life altering decisions. I'm not sure, John, you could jump in.
Yeah, so I'll try to make it real quick. So I believe that voting is fundamentally different than the obligations like jury duty or, say, paying taxes, as it involves, voting or jury duty, and all that would involve personal beliefs where, let's say, where we're holding people accountable. I'm trying to think what I was trying to say. While there are penalties for noncompliance in some civic duties, the act of voting is deeply personal, and I feel should remain a choice rather than an obligation. Treating it like any other civic duty risks reducing the significance for individuals' choice in our democratic society.
Well,
Quick, where did we leave off?
you want me to re-ask my question?
Yeah.
Yeah, let's do that.
Okay. So if we don't require voting, how do we make sure everyone's voice is heard, especially in underrepresented communities that don't have the representation?
I could jump in and start us off on answering that. I feel like when it comes to underrepresented communities, I feel like a good way to counteract that would be more outreach, having more promotion for voting, more political campaign information in those specific areas. and help them become more informed about the vote and being encouraged to show up and actually put in their vote rather than enforcing them and requiring them, just kind of giving them more opportunity rather than forcing that opportunity.
Right. But I just kind of feel like as far as human behavior, like a small penalty, just helps out. Like, think about it, like registration. We pay our cars registration every month because we know if we don't, there's consequences. Just knowing that there's consequences, maybe if it's anything small, I feel like we're more likely to inclined to do it. I feel like it's just human behavior.
I do want to point out that in Australia, they have the mandatory voting, but some of them is just because, like John said, they're just voting just because they're not trying to get the penalties. So, although like mandatory sounds like amazing, like every citizen is like, I guess they're voting, but not being informed and also being forced to vote is kind of like, what's the point of voting if it's like anybody could just vote for anybody and there's no point for voting?
Yeah, I understand what you're saying there as well, but I still feel like, just getting the people there, maybe they will be more inclined to do research and, do their.
Yeah, and I think that can also be a part of with the more access is adding more information out and having easier access to information about the candidates and just supplying the people with what they need and equipping them to be able to go out and vote.
Yeah, Obadiah, I think your point of every voice being heard, I think that's huge, and I think that both directions and both sides would agree that that is probably one of the biggest problems we have. You look at a lot of county races where I'm at, and it's not big cities per se, and some of those races are decided by 30 people when there's, let's say, 500 in that town. They're not all voting. Well, why aren't they? Well, laziness or whatever, it's whatever the contributing factors are. But the point that you had brought up, while every vote is important, expecting citizens to participate through penalties may not lead to a truly representative democracy. Encouraging voluntary participation can foster a more engaged and informed electorate. So I don't know. I see what you're saying, and the voices want to be heard. But I think everybody's had good points about fostering and making it more informed. I think draws people out. I don't know if that made sense or not, but I tried.
Okay, I have a question. So, John, I know you said like some people they may not be able to read and write to understand who they're voting for. So, what if at least when they get to the polls, like there's information there, a small little, it could be a 1 minute video, 30-second video, well, not 30 seconds, a minute video, just letting them know small little facts about the candidates. Do you think would that be better for them?
Again, I think any time that we can, as a country, as a community, as individuals, that we can help foster and teach people that need help, or I don't know the words that I'm actually looking for. When we can reach out and we can do something that's going to help people to be able to vote. Let's say there is a video. I know that they can't do any politicking anywhere near a voting area. You got to be so many feet away, but then again, it comes back to what Santiago was saying earlier. How do we pay for all these changes? And we got to look at the bigger picture where doing that could, I don't know. I have no idea. I can't tell you. I just know it costs more money. And how do we pay for that?
I would like to also have a rebuttal. Like, where would you get those type of resources to actually implement those videos or even like audio stuff like that? Like, where would you get the resources to pay for it? Because all the machines are outdated so far. The government is going to be spending millions to accommodate for those people with disabilities or physical disabilities or health disabilities, where would you guys receive, like, the help? Because as Obadiah and you, Taylor, were talking about, being more informed, that's going to cost us even more. And where would you guys, the question I'm trying to ask is, like, where would you guys get the resources?
Kind of going off of that too. My specific area, a lot of our voting facilities are in schools. So being able to set up those kind of that kind of equipment and technology just kind of adds to the workers' job there, and they're already there for a very long time during the day, and a lot of them are volunteering time out of their day to go and do this. So I think it could ultimately be more trouble and more expense than we can afford right now.
Oh yeah, it's a great question. Obviously I am no financial expert, but I would definitely say that taxes have not always been used probably in the most efficient way by our governments. And if we could redirect any amount of dollars towards this, I think our democracy is important enough. I'm not saying to add dollars, but there's definitely, like I said, I'm no financial expert, but there has got to be money in our government that can be moved to a better cause than what it's going towards at the moment.
No, I agree with you. And something I was thinking about sitting here listening to the last couple conversations, that I think the biggest fear for a lot of people about there being a penalty for somebody to vote is that they just don't know. There have so many uninformed voters now that it's really going to be a lot more. And I think that it's pulled, whether it's the Republican side, the independent side, the Democratic side, that in different areas you have those are the primary voters. And, so how do we deal with that? I don't know the answer to it. I just hope that we don't want it to be crooked. We don't want it to be skewed. We want people to be informed. And I think that's the biggest thing. I think if people were informed and we had the real information and not what somebody wants us to hear, I think we would have way bigger voter turnouts without imposing penalties.
No, and I totally get that too. And I would absolutely be on board for just simply adding more access and adding more information out in the world. But I unfortunately feel like you would almost have to spend money to almost make the effort worth it, if that makes sense.
Right. Well, let's pay us to vote instead of paying us not to vote.
Right, exactly.
I was being facetious. Sorry about that.
So does anybody have any more questions?
I have a question I can throw in there, kind of about the punishment side of that. The criminal records for people would kind of increase with this. So let's say there's somebody who pays their taxes, does everything by the T, but they're kind of, like John was saying, kind of afraid to vote for their lack of knowledge and understanding on all this political stuff, because it can get complicated at times. Um, should this person have a criminal record now? Should they be penalized? Should they be fined and have that on their record for just being afraid to do something like that?
I wouldn't necessarily say a criminal offense or a criminal charge, but it could be just like a parking ticket, just a small little fine that can be paid. And, once you get too many parking tickets, then it turns into you probably looking at a little bit of jail time or something, or community service. It doesn't always have to be just straight criminal offenses.
Yeah, and to add on to that, I would say, again, I know I keep tying this back to jury duty, but similar to jury duty, I think you start with a fine. You could even do like community service or something, and then if it's a recurring act, eventually you would, get up to jail time, but not right away. And also there are exceptions. Like there has to be exceptions for it to work. If you're out of the country, if you are definitely ill. I mean, there are obviously going to be exceptions to the rule. Whether or not that's ironed out right now is not the case, but there would have to be. And I know that there are exceptions in other countries.
Are we ready to close it out?
I think so. We have 4 minutes left.
All right.
Perfect.
Pro side, want to close it out?
Yeah, so like a closing statement on our so to wrap things up, I would just say that we believe that having a penalty for not voting isn't about taking away somebody's personal freedom, but it's about encouraging people to participate in a democracy that affects all of us. It helps our future. It doesn't just help you, but it'll help your children. If more people get involved, it's a better representation of our country and of our voice. Even a small penalty can be a simple way to remind people that their voice does matter. Taylor or Obadiah, you want to take over?
I think you hit all the points. I'm just piggyback off what you said. It's not more so to charge a person or to put them under just by simply not voting. It's to basically get the whole United States on one page, like how other countries they have a small fine that increases their voter turnouts, but if we had just that small fine too, then people couldn't complain about the choices being made, the laws being enforced, because you would have a part in it. And I know a lot of people think just their one vote doesn't affect, but it does make a difference.
Okay. And for me, in the end, a small penalty for voting is not about punishment. It's about encouraging participation in something that affects us all. Democracy only works when people show up. Just like we have responsibilities in other areas of citizenship, voting should be treated the same. And I feel like a minor consequence can help make sure everyone has a voice and everyone is heard.
Drew, you guys, somebody want to start?
I can get us started off.
All right.
I think you guys had a lot of good points for your side, and definitely understand where you're coming from with all of that. I feel like ultimately, though, it contradicts some of our American rights, and as citizens, our right to vote is something that is important, but it is still a right, not an obligation. The First Amendment allows petition, allows freedom of speech, and this could very well be considered a portion of that. It's there are a lot of ways to encourage people with positive reinforcement by having incentives, different things like that that wouldn't necessarily involve punishment.
I would also like to piggyback off him. Like during our speeches, I did learn a lot about the pro side and also con side. Overall, I understand both points. I just believe what Drew said. Like, this is our right. We could either choose to vote or not choose to vote, but we could just like help it. We can't enforce it, and that's all I gotta say.
So in closing for me, everybody had strong points on this, and you guys actually opened my eyes to a couple things, and I won't say you totally swayed me over, but you did definitely make me think about things, and I appreciate that. But if we think about, if we force people who are uninformed to vote, what we are asking for is group thinking and not individual thinking. So my thought on that is, as individuals, I would love for everybody to be informed. And I think that's the biggest problem is the information and people not being properly informed is probably the biggest thing that hurts us in this. Not so much as just a penalty for not voting, but just, I think it'd be more helpful if people were more informed. We also know it's a right to vote. It's not an obligation at this time. If it was any different, and our forefathers would have written that into the Constitution. Although our Senate can change all that if they want, if they choose. And I think I don't know that it's ever been talked about before, to be honest. And there's also those who are wanting to change the system that aren't voting either. They want to change, but they're not voting. So again, we need to make sure if our elected people are going to be changing stuff, if they want to, then they need to be voting too. Anyway, that's where I'm at. I hear what everybody's saying and I really appreciate it. But for me, I think that information and training would be way more valuable than imposing a penalty. But I do feel that it's important for every voice to be heard. Thanks, Obadiah. You opened my eyes to that one.
Okay, guys, am I good to stop recording?
Yes, I think we passed the limit, but yes.